There's a video doing the rounds at the moment on the internet of a disabled man talking to Jacob Rees-Mogg in the street, and he's essentially he's complaining to him about the horrendous treatment that he's received as a disabled person and the generally horrible treatment that disabled people have faced under the Conservatives for the past 11 years. And he's obviously understandably very, very upset. And Rees-Mogg's response is less than ideal. So let's have a look at a clip from that, and then we'll talk about it.
I'll let you get the film.
Hundreds of days because of your policies.
That's not right. The government has a lot of support to help people with this.
Do you realise hundreds?
If you have a particular issue, do contact your local MP. I would encourage you.
You punish us.
We really don't.
I've got a degree. I'm a youth worker. You took my job off me. Then you remade me. I had an assessment. I've got cerebral palsy. I've got a degree in youth work. The Tories took my job off me. Then at the age of 42, I had to prove that I've got cerebral palsy. And you're saying people get jobs. Your party shut my job down. You got rid of us. You're a disgrace.
I'm sorry you think that. But the government's trying to provide as much support as possible
rubbish.
for disabled
you
people.
You took my job off me.
Jesus, man. It's just grim. It's grim. So, watching that is grim. It's just grim. That gentleman, Dominic, is his name. He is saying there that he was a youth worker. He was working in youth services, and he lost his job. Presumably, he said, "You took my job. The Tories took my job," and presumably, what he meant by that was that due to austerity cuts, reduction in budget, slashing the amount of money being spent on public services and on support for things like that he was made redundant, because obviously labour costs are one of the biggest costs in these kind of things, and consequently he had to go on benefits. Right, he had a degree, was a youth worker, and then had to go on benefits, and of course he has had to go through the humiliating process of repeatedly having to prove that he has cerebral palsy. Now, watching that, it's not just harrowing because of the issues that he brings up. This is a guy who has endured a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, a lot of suffering and injustice. Right, and he is not alone. The last 11 years have been very difficult for disabled people, and obviously a lot of the cuts to benefits and the re-engineering of the welfare system to be a lot more strict and a lot more tightly ran, and to prevent it from being very lenient at all, has been incredibly hard on disabled people. Whatever that disability might be, whether it's a physical or mental disability. But what's also awful is Jacob Rees-Mogg's reaction. Now, here is a man who was born into wealth. He went to Eton. Here is a man who is worth, it's estimated, about £100 million. He's one of the richest MPs in Parliament. Rishi Sunak's worth 200 million, I think. Who has repeatedly voted for cuts to welfare services, cuts to benefits, cuts to other public services, who has repeatedly voted for cuts in taxes for the richest people in society, but increases in taxes, even if you count that national insurance contribution increase. He very much supportive of that. On working people, and a guy who has supported making the benefit system much, much more strict and essentially overly bureaucratic. And his response is to essentially deny any responsibility for what's happened. Now, when Dominic says, "You took my job," Jacob Rees-Mogg says, no, that was your employer who did that. Right? And even if it had nothing to do with the government, which it did, the obvious retort to that is, well, the government should have stepped in. Right? If people are getting made redundant, the government should be providing them either with public jobs, through a public jobs programme, to make sure that everyone has stable, high quality employment with fair wages and fair working hours and fair working conditions, or you should be basically getting people into private employment that is as good, if not better, than what they have just left. Now, if you don't do either of those things, then that's a failure of the government. But it's alright, because you can still have a comprehensive social safety net to make sure no one falls into really hard times, and absolute poverty is not an issue for people. But of course, that isn't what the government has done either. The Conservatives have turned a welfare system that was already, a little rough around the edges under Labour from 1997 to 2010 into one that is essentially an overly bureaucratic, cruel, totally inhuman, and very expensive and wasteful system that actually, more often than not, traps people in poverty. And Jacob Rees-Mogg just doesn't want to take any responsibility for that. No responsibility at all. And this is a guy who is a prominent Conservative. He is, he's got a lot of clout within the party. He's been in the party a long time. Big supporter of a hard Brexit. And he is someone who, has his entire career is marked by not giving a shit about ordinary people, just consistently voting for policies that only benefit the richest in society. Maybe there are some things, but I can't think of a single vote that he has cast in the House of Commons that has benefited working people and the poorest 50% of society. And not also the richest. If it's inconvenient for the richest 1%, the richest 0.1%, those ultra wealthy people that donate to the Conservative Party and don't pay their taxes, as has been revealed in the recent Pandora report, if it's inconvenience, if it's an inconvenience to them, yeah, don't support it. But we will slash the amount of money we're spending on benefits, and obviously the universal credit uplift has been reversed, taking £20 away every week from the most vulnerable people in our country, 37% of which have employment. 37% of them are in a job. This myth that work is a route out of poverty is just that. It's a myth. It's not a real reflection of the economic system that we live in at the moment. It's just not. It's just not. It really boils my blood, this. It really does. I'm very angry. Some people in my family are disabled. I've known many really inspirational disabled people. And it is hard enough living your life when you're not able-bodied. That's difficult enough, right? And there are so many disabled people who I think are beyond inspiring for the things that they do. And these are just ordinary people trying to live their lives with those added difficulties, and then you pile on them this ridiculous notion that they might be a benefit scrounger. So you slash the benefits down to the bone, You make it even more bureaucratic, even harder to claim benefits, and then, just to top it all off, you make them prove time and time and time again that they are not fit for work. Now, as Dominic explains in the video, he was fit for work. He is. There are jobs he can do. There are jobs he's very, very well qualified for, and jobs that he's good at. But the government snatched that away from him, and now they're not giving him an alternative other than to claim benefits. So what do you want? What do you want from these people? If they can, they try and get a job. But the quality of the job is almost always terrible. In-work poverty in this country is ridiculously high. About 60% of impoverished people in the UK live in working families. And a lot of disabled people can't work. Right? Or their job opportunities and capabilities are very, very limited because of their disability. So it's absolutely absurd. It's inhuman. There are people who've been deemed fit for work days before they've died. I mean, of illnesses that were obviously apparent as well. You know, they weren't like 25 and then some freak accident happened and they got hit by a car or something. This was people, you know, who obviously had conditions. They were saying, I can't work, I need benefits. Then the Department for Work and Pensions would turn around and say, no, sorry, you're fit for work. And then, you know, they pass away a few days later. This is the level of cruelty and callousness that we have at the moment. And the Conservative Party are out in Manchester, you know, living it up, talking about how great a job they're doing, talking about how fantastic they are and they're getting the country back together, talking about how they have principles, talking about how Boris Johnson is an honest man, talking about how they are the party of working people, they're the party who looks after ordinary people. What a load of absolute shite. What a load of bollocks. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should be ashamed. We really need to have some sort of reckoning in this country for people like that, for people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, because people like Dominic, disabled people in this country, and indeed to a lesser extent just working people, ordinary people generally, have had their lives made demonstrably and obviously worse by this government for the past 11 years, and it's only going to continue as long as they're in office. I'm not going to use this to try and make a political point, because the Labour Party are a mess right now and there's plenty of stuff there that I'm not happy with. But Jesus, at least they support more of a comprehensive welfare system. You know? It's incredibly infuriating. And it's tragic. And I hope somehow, you know, Dominic manages to get his get his job back or something along those lines. But God knows Jacob Rees-Mogg and the rest of the Conservative Party really don't care about that. So next time you're at the ballot box, just have a think, you know. Have a think about what it says about a civilised society that disabled people are being, you know, treated in such a way. Just because we have to stop the benefit scroungers, don't we? First off, hardly anyone who's on benefits is a scrounger. Also, what does that even mean? Most people on benefits are either in work, looking for work, or they can't work. It's a tiny number, who are just there because they can't be bothered working. So we're going to punish everyone else? Because there are still people out there like that, aren't there? There are still the scroungers. They still exist. All we've done by trying to stop them is punish and impoverish disabled people and hard-working, ordinary families. And it's enough. Enough is enough. It's about time it changed. I wish I'd gone to the Conservative Party conference now a little bit. I'd like to have a word with some of them lot. But, yeah. Incredibly soul-destroying, really, but let's use this as you know, as fuel to try and, you know, really get change implemented. But we'll see. I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments. You know, what do you think about this, and how do you think we can reform the benefit system and, you know, our general the sort of position of the economy when it comes to employment and unemployment in the country to make it fairer, make it better for disabled people, because clearly it is failing horrendously, just failing miserably at the moment. So I'd like to hear your thoughts as usual. Thank you very much, as always, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.